On a frosty day in New York, back when the calendar pointed to the middle of the 1940s, murmurs of changing alliances and upheaval lingered in the brisk February air. The Second World War had concluded across Europe, reshuffling political borders and paving the way for the United States to extend its reach as a worldwide power. Against this monumental backdrop, the realm of organized crime was also poised for dramatic reconfiguration, fueled by the shifting winds of global politics and heightened interest from law enforcement. Old orders dissolved as fresh opportunities sprouted for underworld secrets to blossom. And one individual stood at the heart of this pivotal era, Salvatore "Charlie" Lucania, widely remembered as Lucky Luciano. He emerged from a childhood colored by grit and economic despair, but his role in shaping real mafia stories made him legendary. He's often labeled the very architect of the modern crime families, forging bonds that crossed ethnic lines and altering how infamous syndicates would operate from coast to coast. The story of this dark history involves more than just the legend himself. It's also about the men who stood by him, those who molded their own destinies through cunning deals, clandestine alliances, and brazen power plays. Arriving in America at a tender age, Lucania was thrust into a whirlwind of prejudice, financial hardship, and a fierce determination to succeed. His mother and father, both Sicilian, initially hoped the youthful Salvatore, as he was called at birth, would secure a promising education in the land of opportunity. Yet the harsh reality of menial jobs, language barriers, and rampant discrimination soon led him down a different path, one that thrived on notorious kingpins and unsanctioned ways of forging success. In those early years, Italian immigrants clustered into crowded neighborhoods, forging tight bonds to preserve traditions. However, they also encountered towering walls of prejudice, pushing many youths to resent the meager wages parents earned through backbreaking labor. Charlie, just out of boyhood, realized how little school offered him. He was separated from classmates by language, feeling alienated amid foreign textbooks and teachers with no time to help him catch up. Meanwhile, he saw that petty crime on the streets promised quick money, a chance to escape the cycle of drudgery. It didn't take long before he joined up with a ragtag group of local kids orchestrating small smash-and-grabs and street shakedowns, an embryonic but defining period of his criminal apprenticeship. By his mid-teens, Charlie had gleaned that the world around him wasn't controlled solely by legitimate institutions. Organized crime syndicates held just as much sway. Landlords, street corner politicians, and local beat cops, everyone was on the take, or so it seemed to him. The hustlers who flaunted fine clothes and shiny cars were the ones who grabbed his attention? His father's constant pleas to abandon such a lifestyle fell on deaf ears. The call of easy money drowned out any cautionary advice. In time, Charlie faced legal trouble, arrested for drug possession no less, and landed behind bars. But if society aimed to correct him, it failed. Instead, he picked up new strategies and forged connections that would prove vital upon release. Once free, young Luciano vowed never to languish at the bottom again. Prohibition arrived as a thunderous drumbeat of opportunity, banning alcoholic beverages and catapulting black market booze onto center stage. The underworld secrets swirling around smuggling and distribution of liquor were of staggering proportions, and everyone hustled to get a piece. Some saw it as a moment to strike it rich. Others saw it as an opening to dominate entire city blocks. For Charlie, it was the golden ticket that could transform him from a small-time hustler into a big-league force. Yet his ascent wasn't a solitary undertaking. He crossed paths with significant figures who would shape or share his empire. One was Francesco Castiglia, better known as Frank Costello, a cunning operator famed for his insight into corruptible politicians and how to slip bribes smoothly into the right palms. Another was Meyer Lansky, an analytical genius often described as the ultimate brains behind major notorious kingpins. And no tale of this nature would be complete without mentioning Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, renowned for his nerve and flamboyance, an audacious risk-taker with an uncanny ability to spot money-making ventures long before others could see them. Together, these men formed a syndicate brimming with lethal intelligence, ambition, and cunning. Costello was older than Luciano by a handful of years, a fact that bestowed him with a deeper grasp of the city's crooked enforcers, Tammany Hall fixers, and judges who relished shady favors. Despite his own working-class upbringing, Costello understood how to mingle comfortably in upscale company, always ready with measured words and congenial gestures. Nicknamed the Prime Minister of Organized Crime, he possessed an almost magical talent for forging networks with legitimate business people without scaring them off. When local ward bosses or members of law enforcement demanded financial sweeteners, he elegantly obliged. This synergy proved to be an invaluable asset for an up-and-coming crew, one determined to endure. Lansky, on the other hand, came from a background of immigration and adversity that paralleled Luciano's. Though short in stature, he compensated with razor-sharp intellect and an uncanny knack for figures. He congregated with other street kids similarly hungry for a quick buck. People commonly recounted that Lansky had an innate gift for analyzing complex mathematical probabilities, key skills that would ultimately guide the gang's sophisticated gambling and money laundering operations. Tall tales even circulated that he kept track of wagers in his head without error, never losing a cent that was due to him and never failing to pay those who served him well. For a group eyeing bigger stakes, synergy with an analytical whiz was indispensable. Siegel was an altogether different brand of mischief. He epitomized the flashier side of true crime. With his undeniable charm and readiness to resort to brutal violence, he captured the imagination of criminals and bystanders alike. Stories about him abound, how he'd threaten rivals with a grin and cozy up to elegant women in fancy clubs the next night. People whispered that Bugsy could flip from affable to explosive in seconds. Yet from a strategic standpoint, his boldness gave life to countless successful hits, stealth missions, and creative expansions, like in Nevada, where he'd foresee the booming potential of gambling in the desert. Still, Prohibition's biggest allure was the unimaginable stream of revenue flowing through illegal liquor. Storerooms, covert factories, and distribution tunnels mushroomed across the city. Smugglers brought in whiskey from Canada, rum runners funneled shipments from the Caribbean, and crooked local distillers churned out cheap hooch behind boarded windows. Rival outfits erupted, each with the ambition to control or hijack crucial routes. Violence escalated around the docks, and trucks carrying valuable cargo rolled with armed escorts to stave off hijackers. Out by the coastline, Coast Guard patrols tried their best to intercept the incoming flood, but they were simply outnumbered. The more the authorities tried to clamp down, the more determined criminals became to make their fortunes. Luciano's gift for forging alliances distinguished him from many other crime families of the time. Older factions often refused to collaborate with outsiders, clinging to insular traditions. But Charlie believed that sealing alliances beyond Sicilian circles would fortify their network. If trustworthy Jewish or Irish associates had local power or better intelligence on the shipping channels, so be it. Partnerships with them could bring in bigger hauls, quicker distribution, and a stronger foothold across the city. Rival bosses scoffed at this cultural melting pot approach, but as the years passed, those very alliances catapulted Lucky's outfit toward dominance. Money from illegal liquor poured in, propelling lavish spending and expansions into new arenas. Bookmaking became a natural extension. If men were already running whiskey runs, why not set up side operations taking bets on horse races or sports games? And once again, Costello's brilliance in bribery ensured that the right officials looked away, collecting hush money. This evolving empire was no longer a loose band of petty thieves, but a structured, infamous syndicate with shadowy specialists. They had enforcers, logistical experts, political fixers, and a labyrinth of managers to keep the machine humming. Over time, they even devised ways to hide ill-gotten gains through legitimate fronts, bank accounts, and labyrinthine transactions designed to confuse investigators. All the while, waves of law enforcement scrutiny grew. District attorneys, moral crusaders, and rising political stars vied to make their reputations by taking down the dark history of organized crime. Headlines described tense standoffs between these crime outfits and the dedicated G-men or local police squads determined to shut them down. Raids on speakeasies and warehouses uncovered millions in contraband. Yet the big bosses routinely escaped unscathed, sheltered by an intricate web of payoffs and loyal soldiers. Local patrol officers often took lumps of cash to turn a blind eye. Some prosecutors discovered that meddling with these criminal ecosystems threatened their own safety or signaled an abrupt end to their careers. As the 1920s roared on, names like Arnold Rothstein emerged as well, crossing paths with the upstarts. Rothstein, known for his gambling expertise, introduced methods for rigging events and laundering massive sums. He had suspicions about who was worth big bets in the underworld. While extremely adept, he also taught them the pitfalls of mixing reckless aggression with business acumen. Some who forgot that lesson ended up face down in empty lots or vanished without a trace. Rothstein's realm overlapped with the ambitions of Luciano's crowd, forging a complicated mosaic that heightened profits but also magnified danger. New York wasn't the only stage where these real mafia stories played out. Parallel enterprises thrived in places like Chicago, Louisiana, and Florida. Al Capone loomed large in the Midwest, taking advantage of similar prohibition laws to carve out his fearsome empire. The flamboyant gangster excited or terrified those who heard the rumors about his lavish tastes and swift violence. Indeed, Capone's network in Chicago was massive, roping in politicians, law enforcers, and entire neighborhoods. While Capone and Luciano's outfits were separate, they recognized each other's power. Sometimes they cooperated discreetly, ensuring that shipments or deals benefited both parties. Other times, they navigated fragile truces with a watchful eye toward potential betrayal. In fact, Capone had once sought a safer environment, away from the scrutiny of local police out east, and ended up heading west to build his legend. Many who encountered him discovered a man who could be surprisingly warm in private, but merciless when business demanded it. Rumor had it that Capone admired how quickly Lucky Luciano rose up the ranks. Capone even predicted that his East Coast ally would become the king of booze in New York, a prophecy that in many ways came to fruition. Yet controlling territory in the Big Apple wasn't as simple as stacking crates of liquor or lining pockets with bribed officials. Traditional factions, some led by older, more insular bosses, still clung to archaic customs that included secret rituals and unwavering loyalty to outdated codes. They resisted the inclusive approach that Charlie endorsed. But Lucky recognized that forging pacts with Irish or Jewish partners could generate unstoppable synergy. Frank Costello, with his calm persona and willingness to drop his old name in favor of one that sounded less traditionally Italian, set a shining example of adaptation. This synergy demonstrated some of its earliest successes in the realm of union racketeering. Luciano and his crew realized they could hijack local unions, forcing businesses to comply with work stoppages unless they coughed up funds. By combining threats and negotiations, they made unions into powerful leverage points. Politicians needed union support to win, and the criminals exploited that. Police who wanted fewer headaches on the picket lines sometimes exchanged leniency for bribes. Similar tactics were adopted in different states, weaving an underground network that extended well beyond New York. Their momentum soared as the decade progressed, yet so did the tensions among various criminal figures who wanted to claim the largest share. Some old-school bosses demanded tributes, or that younger gangsters bend the knee, while new alliances insisted on rewriting the rules to churn out modern, streamlined, and more profitable structures. In the swirl of competing agendas, bloodshed was inevitable. A wave of murders and public shootouts forced city authorities to intensify their crackdowns. The sensational press coverage turned men like Luciano, Costello, Lansky, and Siegel into household names, fueling the fearsome legend of the organized crime wave sweeping the nation. When federal agencies and prosecutors like Thomas E. Dewey rose to prominence, the city's underworld faced fresh obstacles. Dewey boldly targeted top echelons of the mob, collecting testimonies from lesser associates. In trying to corner big shots, he aimed to expose the secret communications linking criminals to powerful judges, cops, and political machines. Though it seemed near impossible, Dewey's unrelenting drive steadily closed in on some heavy hitters. His highest-profile pursuit became the downfall of Lucky Luciano, whom he managed to convict on prostitution charges, though to many, the trial's fairness remains debatable. As the 1930s slipped into the 1940s, the world erupted into the cataclysm of the Second World War. Even among the chaos, these underworld secrets persevered. Rumors circulated that certain officials reached out to the Mafia for help in securing dockyards from saboteurs, an unfathomable alliance between national security agencies and criminals united against foreign threats. This uncertain relationship underscored how infamous syndicates could wield enormous influence even in times of war. Meanwhile, new battles beckoned. With the war's end came the Cold War, fueling fear of communist expansion. Law enforcement began reigniting efforts to dismantle smuggling rings, narcotics pipelines, and vice industries, anticipating new lines of contraband that might unfold beneath the city lights. Although Leonard "Charlie" Lucania was eventually deported to Italy, this didn't snuff out the impetus of organized crime. He may have stepped off American soil, but his crime family alliances remained entrenched. Younger faces rose to fill power vacuums. One rising figure proved to be Carlo Gambino, a shrewd operator who used cunning and patience to ascend in the hierarchy. Gambino had gleaned from Lucky the power of strategic alliances, also learning from his mistakes, like how open flamboyance could attract unwanted scrutiny from the authorities. By maintaining a discreet behind-the-scenes profile, Gambino outlasted many flamboyant peers who had fallen to bullets or indicted on major charges. As for the flamboyant Siegel, his ambitions carried him westward to the desert, linking with Lansky to birth the Las Vegas expansion. Despite the risk, Bugsy saw gold in building glamorous casinos. Had it not been for financial miscalculations and internal betrayals, he might have reaped the full glories he so passionately envisioned. Yet that story ended in tragedy, culminating in Siegel's death under murky circumstances, a stark reminder that in the dark history of big-time crime, anyone can be undone by a single poorly managed fiasco. The westward expansion of gambling, though, trudged on, eventually shepherded by Lansky's measured perspective and the backing of other partners with deeper pockets or cooler heads. Meanwhile, Frank Costello, the prime minister who glided effortlessly among cafes of the upper class, was likewise targeted as the public face of corruption in the post-war era. He withstood legal battles, dodged questions at televised hearings, and wrestled with the dual role of public figure and secret kingmaker. Eventually, Costello too became wary of the limelight. A famous attempt on his life shook him, leading him to relinquish some of his organization's daily responsibilities. These latter chapters illustrate how the older generation melded cunning survival with the knowledge that power was ephemeral. A single missed shot or a single unwavering prosecutor could redefine the future. And what of Lucky, the so-called father of New York's restructured mafia? Despite being forced to leave the United States, he stayed connected with allies who visited Europe or corresponded through hidden channels. Italy, an ancestral homeland he'd known only as a child, felt both familiar and alien upon his return. As American authorities remained on high alert, Lucky continued overseeing some aspects of the global narcotics trade. Allegations ran wild that he orchestrated heroin shipments from overseas into North America, fueling a wave of addiction that the government sought in vain to eradicate. He also faced personal challenges, recognizing how the old neighborhoods had either changed or vanished altogether. Some relatives in Sicily were no longer alive. The ones who remained regarded him with apprehension. The local mafia structures on that side of the ocean recognized him as a man of knowledge with vast contacts. Meanwhile, he found himself longing for the dizzying hustle and bright chaos of the city he'd once dominated. Over time, the complexities of his official deportation status overshadowed his youthful bravado. Though he tried persuading authorities to let him re-enter the US, there was no leniency. In that sense, the unsolved mysteries swirling around his future loomed as large as any raging battle for territory. All of this, prohibition, political corruption, internal feuds, alliances with the hushed corners of power, converged into a majestic tapestry of true crime narratives. The era reshaped American society, not just within city blocks or industrial yards, but also in legislative chambers, courtrooms, and cultural discussions about what was and was not an acceptable way to make a living. While some politicians seized the opportunity to wax hero, I see about stamping out infamous syndicates. Continuous streams of money complicated every moral stance. Even certain moralistic leaders found themselves accepting help from shady factions, especially when wartime sabotage threatened national interests. The lines between right and wrong were often blurred under pragmatic demands. After the war, the government declared a fresh crusade, the war on narcotics. This new offensive aimed to crush the drug networks that had begun blossoming during Prohibition, then continued flourishing with different contraband. Alcohol gave way in some circles to heroin, morphine, and exotic products from overseas. An entire generation of criminals witnessed how easily they could adapt supply chains from whiskey to harder substances. And so the chase resumed, with newly specialized agents and legislative measures creeping into the private dealings of the underworld. By the end of the 1940s and start of the 1950s, countless families, Lucianos, Costellos, others in Chicago, Florida, or Louisiana, had entrenched themselves deeply, leaving fleeting illusions that the tide might be reversed. The networks were too big. They had watchers and loyalists in place at every stage, from the waterfront to upper legislative offices. Still, law enforcement refused to throw in the towel, continuing to stage raids or set up wiretaps to expose entire webs of criminal conspiracies. Occasional arrests did occur, and once powerful men found themselves in handcuffs. But those men were promptly replaced, and the cycle spun onward. Even as old leaders gave way to younger replacements, the legend of Lucky Luciano remained. Historians, authors, and film directors painted pictures of him as either a cunning manipulator of organized crime or a practical businessman forging the ultimate synergy among criminals of diverse backgrounds. Did each portrayal speak the truth? Probably some version of truth resided in them all, wrapped within the complexities that define any major underworld figure. Perhaps his greatest legacy was that he understood how to let go of archaic customs, forging a new, more flexible method of governance. In so doing, he arguably transformed the entire notion of the American mob, making it less an ethnically homogeneous clan and more an empire run by opportunists who prized profit above any vendetta or parish loyalty. It's astonishing to recall that at first, Charlie was just a street kid skipping class, hustling pennies from schoolchildren. In those early days, he was overshadowed by established older dons who demanded unwavering deference. Through a mixture of nerve, alliances, borderline luck, and cunning strategy, he elevated himself to be a boss among bosses. And that transformation happened alongside equally iconic players like Costello, Lansky, and Siegel, figures who remain staple names whenever people discuss underworld secrets or crime families. They left behind a complicated legacy, with lines that separated legitimate capitalism from gangster capitalist infiltration often blurred or erased altogether. Yet nothing demonstrates the fluid nature of these true crime sagas better than how some of these personalities ended up. Lucky was sent away, living on the fringes, then passing away in Italy. Capone succumbed to disease after time in federal prison, a far cry from his unstoppable days in Chicago. Siegel perished violently, ambushed by bullets at a Beverly Hills home. Lansky managed to cling to freedom, though the government hunted him for decades. Costello faced close calls, beguiling media circuses, and eventually opted for a quieter life. The next wave took hold in small increments, gradually overshadowing those who had come before. Legendary as their influences had been, a cycle of replacements was in motion, ensuring the story advanced into the future under new leaders like Gambino. For many, these stories are tethered to the gunfights, the dramatic arrests, or the sound of whiskey crates rattling in the back of trucks. Yet the deeper tapestry is about the intangible alliances, the delicate manipulations of law enforcement, and the unexpected collisions with international affairs. That's the lifeblood of real mafia stories, the constant tension between seizing power and evading the law. Outsiders often marvel at the gangster kingpins' lavish parties, cunning political gambits, or unstoppable expansions. But none of that is possible without forging sturdy ties among an intricate web of accomplices, from accountants who manage the complex finances to local officials who supply crucial permits. The unstoppable wave of bootlegging wealth reconfigured entire segments of American society, reshaping local economies, fueling big city building booms, and even influencing wars among organized crime factions thousands of miles away. The fortunes that trickled into bribery shaped electoral outcomes, placed judges on benches, and boosted or ruined the careers of starry-eyed district attorneys who either cooperated or confronted these infamous syndicates. Once Prohibition ended, the beverage trade resumed legally, leaving men like Luciano and Costello to pivot into nightlife enterprises, union extortion, gambling meccas, or the blossoming global narcotics pipeline. Indeed, the unstoppable hunger for power never really ceased. It merely adapted, branching into new spheres behind the same clandestine handshake deals that had kept them afloat all along. The subsequent decades saw multiple high-profile hearings, exposés, and trial dramas that occasionally snagged a top figure, but rarely dismantled the entire structure. Even in the 1960s, senators hammered away at the mafia's existence, determined to shine a glaring spotlight on the dark history entwined with labor unions and city politics. And though the FBI famously denied the existence of a nationwide crime network for a while, it's clear in hindsight that a complex tapestry tied all these crime families together from coast to coast, with the National Commission acting as a unifying framework that regulated disputes, territory divisions, and internal codes. In that sense, Charlie had effectively sown the seeds for a new order where no single region overshadowed all others, and each faction had to adhere, at least in principle, to communal rules. Yet for better or worse, Lucky Luciano's shadow never faded from the conversation. Even accounts written long after his death continue to debate how influential he truly was. Some describe him as the undisputed father of the contemporary mafia, while others argue he merely accelerated changes already bubbling in the underworld. Still, no one disputes the staggering transformation that occurred during his path from that cramped Lower East Side childhood to the menacing boardrooms of clandestine multi-state operations. His deportation signaled that the American authorities viewed him as a genuine threat to public order. Ironically, from abroad, he still held a measure of sway, though never exactly as he had on those grimy city streets. While the 1940s concluded and the 50s dawned, personal relationships tested the solidarity of these alliances. Luciano and his longtime associates occasionally found themselves at odds. Younger upstarts, hungrier and sharper with modern tactics, jostled for bigger slices of the pie. Some fixers, once loyal, drifted away or formed smaller splinter gangs. The seeds of fracturing often emerged from disputes over gambling territories in Las Vegas, control of shipping docks, or distribution rights for heroin. Many of these disagreements simmered behind closed doors, leading to whispered murders, suspicious disappearances, and uneasy realignments. The authorities saw glimmers of internal discord, but rarely assembled enough evidence to press formal charges. Public interest in these underworld secrets soared when newspapers splashed headlines about mob murders or lavish gatherings. One particularly renowned meeting took place in the late 1950s, the Apparent Fiasco, where officials believed major American crime bosses convened to discuss shared business. The subsequent crackdown revealed some of the biggest names in the syndicate, though cunning figures like Meyer Lansky managed to slip away. Even Frank Costello, who had reportedly begun easing out of direct operations, found himself back under scrutiny. The spectacle reminded the country that no matter how refined or forceful these notorious kingpins appeared, they were ever vulnerable to an unexpected raid by unstoppable lawmen. Over time, historical perspectives have recast these criminals in various lights: cunning businessmen, monstrous predators, persecuted men of circumstance, or brilliant innovators in the fringes of capitalism. Movies glamorize them. Books dissect their every move. Researchers compile volumes of evidence, still uncertain about exactly who pulled which strings. Yet the story of Lucky Luciano remains seminal, like a restless spirit haunting modern true crime discourse. In many respects, he symbolizes that turning point where the old tradition-bound mafia gave way to a more business-minded, multi-ethnic confederation that eventually blossomed across America. When retelling any dimension of this saga, we cannot help but recall that it all started with a young immigrant boy in an overcrowded neighborhood, pressed by poverty and steered by the hunger to transcend an existence of crumbs. We see how I'm forging alliances with other bold youngsters, some Jewish, some Irish, some Italian, and rising to wealth on a wave of prohibition-fueled chaos. We see them systematically bribing cops and officials, outrunning the meager efforts of law enforcement, and forging a robust pipeline of illegal liquor from places like Canada or outlying islands straight to thirsty city dwellers. A swirl of organized crime flourished in plain view, eventually capturing the attention of politicians who needed the mob's influence to secure their own election campaigns. Then came the epoch of arrests, sentences, and deportations, culminating in that pivotal moment when Lucky was ushered back across the Atlantic. Friends in high places tried to intervene, enemies happily applauded his exile. But even that dramatic send-off, with him standing on a ship to Italy, wasn't the end. The tentacles of his empire and those of his allies remained deeply coiled around American underground economies. His blueprint had redefined how infamous syndicates would structure themselves for decades, ensuring that underworld secrets still thrived under new management. That continuing presence reveals why historians contend that removing one man never cures the underlying conditions that gave birth to these transnational enterprises. So, this is the sweeping saga of a restless era. An era shaped by the end of a global conflict, the dawn of a new superpower, and the unstoppable growth of criminal networks weaving through the cracks of legitimate power structures. It's a stark reminder that while official governments fought visible wars, crime families waged their own hidden battles for profit. By forging pacts with contradictory allies and ensuring total infiltration of local institutions, they created a system so complex that even the best-intentioned authorities found it nearly impossible to unravel. Amid it all stands Salvatore "Charlie" Luciano, the man who walked away from a life of meager prospects to carve a name in the annals of notorious kingpins. Though eventually forced to bid farewell to New York, it was a farewell that didn't end the story but merely forced it to adapt. Long after that boat sailed from Brooklyn to Italy, the blueprint he drafted shaped the Mafia's modern face. Others, like his one-time associates Gambino, Lansky, Siegel, Costello, or even those from Chicago like Capone, formed chapters of this grand narrative. Each contributed uniquely, whether through financial wizardry, raw force, or political manipulation. Government agencies, for their part, launched campaigns, congressional hearings, and elaborate sting operations, proclaiming a fierce determination to disable these forbidden kingdoms. Yet the underworld, with its labyrinthine connections, endured well past all predictions. A combination of unwavering ambition, shifting alliances, and strategic cunning boosted its survival. And every new wave of bosses recognized, in some measure, the brilliance of the foundation left by Lucky Luciano. Even now, echoes of that world remain embedded in the public imagination. People still gravitate toward true crime sagas revealing the secrets behind organized crime, with documentaries and feature films exploring the layered lives of these notorious kingpins. Their myth continues, tinted with moral questions, intellectual curiosity, and an odd dash of nostalgia for a time when fedora-wearing gangsters commanded entire city blocks. But behind that romantic veneer lie real victims, real bloodshed, and real stories of exploitation. The darkest parts of crime families overshadowed by iconic images of gangster glamour. No matter how many decades slip by, historians highlight the massive fortunes in gambling, the cunning infiltration of labor unions, and the sophisticated web of finances that made these infamous syndicates so resilient. The unsolved mysteries around certain assassinations and alliances add further allure. Rumors swirl of lost stashes of cash, undisclosed negotiations, or double crosses that changed the course of entire underworld empires. Some conspiracies even intimate government complicity, pointing out that in times of dire necessity, like warfare, leaders sometimes collaborated with the likes of Lucky to protect American shores. Thus, the life and times of Salvatore "Charlie" Lucania remain a testament to how fleeting circumstances, like the ban on liquor, can produce seismic shifts in criminal enterprise, swiftly elevating small-time hooligans to national power brokers. By forging ties among Italians, Jews, the Irish, and more, he redefined the scope and scale of how organized crime could operate. Though deported, his influence lingered in the corridors of gambling dens, shipping routes, narcotics distribution channels, and political backrooms. One can't help but wonder if, in his quieter moments, Lucky ever pondered how different life might have been had he excelled in school or if he'd chosen an honest trade. Perhaps the lure of easy riches was too potent to ignore in a city that never slept. Perhaps the prejudicial forces shaped his worldview, convincing him that conventional toil led nowhere. Whatever the incremental motives, the end result was a phenomenon of unstoppable magnitude, still fueling fascination for true crime enthusiasts around the globe. And there, in a cold February nearly at mid-century, Lucky offered a final, silent goodbye to the skyscrapers and bustling avenues that had witnessed his transformation from a brash youngster to the orchestrator of new realms of underworld secrets. Many came to bid him farewell. Allies from Louisiana, Cleveland, Philadelphia, New York itself, all paying homage to a man who'd once unified them under a broad, if unofficial, network. He sailed off, but the footprints he left behind marked a revolution in dark history that no amount of chasing or deporting could fully erase. Yet in the end, the story of Charlie Lucky Luciano is inseparable from the story of endless ambition, of forging an empire against all odds, fueled by prohibition, sustained by bribery, and defended through strategic violence. It's both a cautionary tale of how easily corruption can sink its claws into governance and an illustration of how desperate or daring individuals can exploit the system to their greed's content. With each passing year, as new chapters in real mafia stories unfold, echoes of his blueprint still resonate. The names change, the politics evolve, but the core lessons remain as relevant as ever. Alliances matter, money can corrupt nearly anything, and criminal ambition rarely knows any bounds. That's the panorama of Lucky Luciano and his entangled allies, a swirl of unscrupulous deals, cold-blooded hits, friendships turned sour, and the unspoken yet formidable unions that shaped entire cities. While his deportation ended one chapter, the epic saga of organized crime rolled on. And though the pages continue turning in the annals of infamous syndicates, Charlie's imprint stands out. Perhaps that final image of him in 1946, stepping onto a ship destined for Italian shores, encapsulates the paradox of a man who built a fortune in America, yet had to depart it forever. Even so, the outfit he helped create lived on, forging new legends, forging new grudges, forging new streams of revenue. And thus, the tumultuous sway of that era's crime families never truly vanished. The flames burned on, fueled by the very structures he'd helped set in motion.